Alright guys, so I've already disassembled this camera just because I wanted to make sure I fully figured it out before I started showing you how to do this. But I just wanted to point out and show you how this lens has been damaged. It's been dropped and it's hit the road and it's chipped. Now I've seen videos where you can actually try and polish that out, but for the amount of time and effort that's going to take versus actually replacing the whole camera mod, I'm going to go with that. I found it on AliExpress, $107 delivered, and have been able to get that little camera mod replaced. So what I'm just going to quickly show you is the collection of screws and parts that you will be removing as you work through this. Now I've seen a couple of other videos out there and they've gone and try to drill this out. This lens cover is actually really difficult to remove. This little plastic circle comes off quite easily, but the actual glass is glued onto the lens mod and you need to Dremel that off or grind that off, and that's not really what I wanted to do for the sake of about $40 more. You pay about $50 or $60 just for the lens replacements, or you can pay $107 and get the whole lens mod. So just over here, and I will zoom in on these just so we can see them a bit more clearly, we have all the parts that are going to come out as you disassemble the unit. So on the bottom here we have a little cover, and that's where the SD card goes in, and we have 4 little short black screws that go into that. Then we have the side cover. That's the side cover there, and it was actually hidden underneath all this glue. We have these 2 black screws. So one of the black screws goes on that side and the other one goes on this side next to where the battery goes in. So you can see that little bit of blue. That's actually some Loctite. We're actually just going to be pushing that back in there to line that back up and screwing that little black screw back in there. Then we also have these 2 silver screws. These silver screws go in the top on either side of this microphone, and that cover goes on top of that. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws. We also have the very tricky and the very fiddly spring mechanism, so just when you're taking that all apart, just be careful that you don't lose that spring and you don't lose that little pin. Now I will show you how to put that together later. That's a really fiddly bit. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to get in here and remove the damaged camera mod, and you'll notice there's a 2L and underneath there is actually says 2R. So we know that we've got the orientation correct. So I'll just show you that is what we're going to be replacing with. I've got a little finger smudge on that lens, but it's actually in really good condition. So next thing we want to do is remove these 4 screws here, and this is where the lens mod is actually held in place. So I'm just very carefully undoing those. All right, and then the other thing we're going to want to do is very gently and carefully lift these little tabs out, being very careful not to damage anything. I like this knife because it's super thin. I'm going to pop those little guys out. Lift that camera unit straight out. Tip those screws out. Then we're going to, the way around I would do it is actually drop these teeny tiny screws in here first. So it's going to be really difficult to line those up afterwards. 4 screws. Just gently does it. No, I don't want to damage anything at this point. Okay, great. So just need to lift the camera up so that the housing can sit flush. Go. Remember, this is metal going into plastic, so we just want to be really gentle. Okay, next step, we want to just pop these clips back in. Sure they're lined up. First, click. And in she goes. So we now have those clipped in. Polish that off and clean that all off later. Now what I would like to do is actually, before we put all of this back together, I'm going to test that. Okay, so this is probably the trickiest part of the whole process. This little door that holds the battery in place, it clips open when you unlock it with this little mechanism here. And you'll notice when you pull everything apart that this tiny little spring might fall out. So what you need to do is find the little groove. And you see that spring's got a little bit of a little tail on it. That little tail sits in that groove. Pin holds it in place. So while we're assembling it, you're just going to rest that back part of the spring on the door and slide that pin in. Slide that pin in, and then adjust. That's a little bit of a delicate operation, but if you let gravity be your friend for a minute, we're going to pop that pin in there, and then the spring mechanism sits in behind here, and once it's under tension, it's a little bit less likely to fall out. Okay, and we'll just tuck the spring in behind there. So next time we open that door, that's going to hold open like that. So from this point on, we just want to be careful not to let that fly out. So what I'm going to do next, make sure that's lined up, and when we start putting everything back together, just making sure that battery housing is moving into place. Make sure everything's nicely lined up. And we're going to start clipping this back together. There we go. Clip, clip. Right, that's all clipped back together. We're going to drop in one of the slightly longer back screw on this side. That's that black screw in on that side, and then the other one goes in here. There's a single little medium length or the longer of the black screws if you do get them mixed up. So that's on the side next to the charging port. And what I am quickly going to do is just pop this battery in. Make sure that it powers on before I put everything back together. So far so good. Alright, great. It's turning on and turning off. Great. Next we're going to replace this panel. And it's not a bad idea to work on a tray or even a light colored microfiber cloth. To kind of prevent damage to the lenses that you've just replaced. And also if you do drop one of these little tiny black screws, if you're working on a dark surface, it's going to be harder to find them. So that's the 4 screws in the bottom. And then we have 2 more to go in the top. That's these silver screws. Now to stick everything back in, you could use maybe some hot glue, but what else I've also seen is just a bit of double-sided tape. Just going to use a little strip of double-sided tape to hold that microphone cover in place. Obviously we don't want to go over the microphone. You might need a pin or something to lift up the tape. To be honest, I'm not super concerned with the audio from this device. Pop that in. If we think it's going to come out, I might put a bit more of that tape in there. And then we got one more little bit. I'm going to get some double-sided tape there. Glue that all together and throw an SD card in it, and fingers crossed we have got a fully working Insta360 One X. The grand total of $100. Thanks, Steve.